whether you're joining us, got it? Whether you're joining us live here on Wednesday or whether you're watching this video afterwards, really glad that you're thinking about applying for management consulting. I've been working with this subject for several years now, and it is one of my favorite subjects to be involved in. And I'm going to walk you through the things that I think that you're going to gain out of being a participant in this subject, being a student consultant, as we refer to, and a little bit, and then I'll talk about what you'll gain, some of the benefits. We'll have Hugh, who previously was a student consultant, talk about his experience. And then finally, we'll end today with information around the application process and so forth. Now, what I'll do is I'll speak first, and then I'll take any questions that you have about that particular portion of the material. I'll turn it over to Hugh. He'll speak, and he'd be happy to take any questions that you have. And then finally, when I come back and deliver the last part of the material, if you have any questions as well, you can pop them into the chat if you don't want to try to remember them, and I will get to them and I will see them, or you can come off camera, on camera, and ask as well. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Bear with me just a moment while I share my screen. All right, so here we go. As I mentioned, semester 2, 2022 information session. So Joko is the person who just did the introductions, and he is the experiential learning coordinator. He will be the person on the other end of the email and on the other side, admin team working with the applications. So we have a client-facing team, and we also have a student-facing team, and Joko would be the main contact there. Now, my name is Chris Young. I'm the subject coordinator. I'm also one of the coaches, or have been historically, and so that means I handle all of the lecturing and administrative pieces and academic side of the subject. In addition to that, I also take on several student teams, several client teams, and work directly with those several groups as well. All right, so a common question we get is, well, what is management consulting and what is this subject about? This is really an opportunity that has come about because we recognize, and because the University of Melbourne recognizes how important it is for students to gain practical skills and to really bridge that gap between what you've been learning at university. Excuse me one second. No. Sorry, folks, I'm dog watching. I apologize. Somebody wants a little bit of attention. So what we're talking about here is the bridging the gap between the studies that you've been doing and the work world. And this is really an opportunity in this subject for you to gain several of the things listed here. So you're going to learn about industry practices, what actually happens in management consulting, and what are the tools and other that you would use. You'll be able to build not just research, but really strong industry research and analysis skills. Those folks that come into this subject are really high achievers and high performers. And the research and analysis that you've been doing up to this point, we will help accentuate and accelerate that to be really in depth. And that's through using the library resources and the client resources and so forth. You're going to learn what it means to behave right and present in a business setting. We have full confidence in the capability of the applicants and the student consultants to be able to do this, but there's nuances that you learn when you take a subject like this that help elevate your understanding of practice and behaviors in the business, in the work world, if you will. You're going to have a chance to experience a real live consulting project in a real business environment. So we ask all of the clients to prepare a brief around something that they are motivated to learn about, that they would like to know for their own business. And that means that's a real live consulting project that doesn't have an answer, that may not have been investigated yet by the client. And you will be at the forefront of really understanding what that issue and what the key question is, and what that looks like in the business environment. And then finally, it is a great opportunity to build your professional network. Hugh may attest to this, as well as many students have said to me over the years, that they are really tight and close with the group that they worked with. And they also continue to keep in contact with their coach, or myself as lecturer, or whomever the lecturer was, and then also with the client. And so that's about building who you know and who knows you. And that is also a great opportunity. All right. So I mentioned here that you're going to have a chance to do real consulting experience. And I think that's a real differentiator about this subject. It's not a case study. It's not something that's already been done. You're actually going to be starting and developing your understanding of whatever the issue is. So you're going to learn what the consulting process is for projects. And what I mean by that is you're going to learn things about issue trees and SCQA, an acronym that will come to mean something in the subject, how to develop a data collection plan, business presentation, writing report. And all of these things are tools, consulting process tools that you develop. You will also be negotiating with clients. And that might sound a bit unusual, but the client will be asking things of you or have expectations, some of which can be done within a 12-week period. And sometimes they might have a longer list than is possible. And so you negotiate what the group is capable of within the time and the scope of the project. You're going to plan out research and what that means to collect the data, secondary data, primary data, to be able to have enough and sufficient evidence to be able to analyze that data and make real practical recommendations. And these are skills that you'll be able to, once this subject is done in 12 weeks, these are your skills that you will take with you, whether you choose to do management consulting in the future or you do something else. These are really important consulting type experiences that will be yours to own. So how does this placement work? Well, let me tell you what it's not, if that's all right. It's not meant to be, it's not an internship. So it's not a paid internship. It's not work experience where you're doing, perhaps maybe doing something administrative or secondary. You don't actually work for the company. You are what we call a student consultant, and you are there to to apply the consulting techniques that I teach you in the lectures around those tools I mentioned, to be able to actually apply them, right? So you're not there to learn a specific industry. And this becomes really important because we have a wide range of finance and banking and insurance, and we've had the AFL, we've had marketing companies, architecture. It's not there to learn the discipline that the business is in. So that's what it's not. What it is getting back to learning the process and those tools of consulting. And you're taking those processes and those tools and you're applying them to a real active live organization. We get such a wide range of consulting projects and clients. And why I think this is really interesting is we have had clients that have gone so far and found the value add of the student consultants in their project, where they have presented the findings to their board, to their executive board. They have taken the findings and applied it with a product that has gone to market, that is used by people in the industry. They have used that information, the findings and the research and insight for their own clients, right? So that's the real value add that can be seen here. So you're going to learn how to be a consultant, and then you're going to learn to be a consultant for your client. So we have such a range of projects. So I mentioned here, well, sorry, let me just backtrack. We asked the clients before the semester starts, what would you like to work on? What issues or business problems or opportunities are you thinking about in your business currently? And so that means that the projects are really relevant to the client and they're quite invested in what they ask us to brief the teams on and what the teams are working on. And some of those things can be strategic, meaning future looking. They can be operational around the business at present, or a combination. And you can see here that there's a range of topics. We've had risk, we've had performance measurement and benchmarking, particularly around HR or engagement, for example. We've had projects that have involved business analysis, what's happening in the business and what might be done differently. Competitor analysis, so how do we benchmark against our competition? What are they doing better? Is the value that we can add, and what should we do going forward? Where should we focus our time and our resources? And I mentioned as well product development, so actual products going to market, doing the background research and so forth before that happens. The names attached to some of these projects are wide-reaching. So you can see here that we have some really recognizable organizations. We've got, Deloitte and EY, KPMG. These are really large, well-known international consulting organizations. Procter and Gamble, P&G, so they do products. TCV, which is Hugh worked. He worked on a project with TCV. So we've got government, and we have consulting. We have small companies, large companies, international, domestic. So quite a range that come to us that bring that serve as a host. I think it's really important for anyone who's thinking about applying to really understand the commitment and what you're signing up for. So there are requirements, there's academic requirements, and then there's project requirements. And those things are both separate, but consist of the whole commitment to the subject. So every week there is a lecture and there are workshops, and you must attend the lectures and workshops to 80%. There are also a 4-week set time every week, which is considered a consultation or a client visit. You have to attend 100% of those. So you nominate a time and a day that you're available. We match based on major and project and quite a number of factors, students, applicants, successful applicants to the projects. And if you say that you're available Tuesday from 1 to 5, for example, then for 12 weeks, Tuesday 1 to 5, 11 weeks, 2 to 12, you need to be available. You cannot miss any of those sessions. So there's client visits. There is a strong commitment to team, because this project cannot be done without teamwork. It simply can't. It can't be done well. And so it's about everybody being on board and really understanding that they have to deliver on their piece of the work to bring it all together. You really have to be confident and comfortable with doing self-directed learning. As a coach, I'm aware of the projects and I am there to assist, but no one is going to know the projects like your team, like you and your team. And so that means you have to be really self-directed in your research. You have to ask questions. You have to reach out to the client, reach out to your coach in order to be able to read the articles and information that's provided to you. You have to go the extra step and direct your own learning, because only you will know, based on the project and based on the needs of the project, where that learning needs to go. So it's not formulaic. I can teach you the tools and the process, but I can't direct all of the learning, because much of it is going to be guided by what your client needs. So that's the reason for that. And then finally, you want to be an active learner. And that goes with that self-directed learning, but you can't be a passive learner in this subject. You are doing work for, or you're consulting with a client. And that means that you have to be really active and proactive. With an academic subject such as this, there are certain assessments, and they are listed here. So you're signing up to complete a project charter, to do an issue tree and a research plan, to prepare a team presentation that you deliver in week 11, and to have a professional report completed, 5,000 word professional report completed by the end of week 12. All right. So, I having done this subject, I would say there's great benefit and great things to gain. But I do want to point out that I believe it really depends on the individual student's attitude, what you're going to gain from the MCA experience. I think it's the rare exception when somebody doesn't gain the things that are listed here. And that might be for any, maybe a small personal reason. But when you have the right attitude and you're coming at it, what you're going to gain are those things listed. So you will gain true and real consulting experience that you can talk about with future employers, that are going to build your skills, that you'll be able to take with you once the subject is done. You're going to have opportunities for networking within the business, with the clients, with your peers, and with the coaches and the lecturer. You're going to be able to take this uni knowledge that you've been working on for 2-3 years, all of this information that you've been absorbing and practicing through assessments and talking about and working on with your peers. You're going to take that and put that into practice in the work world. And so you're going to be, for example, if you're working with TCV, you might be taking economics and your understanding of economics and financial modeling and applying that. You might be taking your knowledge of marketing, for example, and working on a product development and what that means to communicate that product to the external market. So that uni knowledge in practice. And then, as I mentioned before, you're going to develop professional skills that, my heavens, are yours and yours to keep. And this is really important, that teamwork and communication, but in a really elevated professional sense. The research that you're going to get, really understanding the databases and the deep research that's available to you at University of Melbourne, that the library pays for, that your clients are going to be wowed because you're bringing something they may not have access to them. What great value. So you'll know what questions to ask and where to find good research. That's a skill you develop. And then presentation. What does it mean to present yourself? What does it mean to present in a PowerPoint? So some of those tools, how to present and articulate your message in a report as well. And then finally, because it's highly likely that it will be remote, you're going to be learning and developing that ability to work remotely, which we know in this time and day is incredibly important, because it is highly, highly likely that you will be doing remote work in some capacity when you graduate. And so being able to say, I know how to do that and do it well, that's an experience that you can talk about and gain as well. All right, so I'll just pause here for a moment. Does anyone have any questions for me around the benefits and the experience and the assessments? I take this as a sign perhaps that I've covered it in a very complete manner, which is great. If anything comes to you, oh wait, we do have something in chat. Let me see. Oh, well, that's from Joko. Thank you, Joko. Yeah, so do feel free to pop any questions that you have. Okay, I'll take that as a sign we can move forward and hear from Hugh on his experience. So what I'd like to do is introduce a former student consultant, Hugh Morgan. He was working with the Treasury Corporation of Victoria, did a fantastic job. Hugh, let me turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so I'll just talk about, I guess, back up and give some evidence to a lot of the things that Chris said, but also sort of, give you a better understanding of what it's like from a student. So I'll be talking a little bit about, working in a team, some cultural differences in the workplace, stuff I wouldn't mind doing differently if I went back, about how long you're going to be working on the projects, and then pretty much anything else that's sort of not in the handbook that I can give a bit of a better perspective on. So working in a team, I think it's really important to sort of be at the beginning, just try and focus on, building strong connections and stuff, because that's the thing that's going to last throughout the entire project. And the thing that's going to be lasting and help you through all those times when you have self-directed learning and you're looking at this document, not knowing what to do and where to go next, and be able to bounce ideas off people in a really relaxed fashion, is something, really important to do, and definitely an important skill to learn for when you're going to go into the workplace. So just sharing opinions with each other and, going through that process before sort of delegating tasks, and, really find the mood and how everyone else is feeling, because that's sort of going to help you down the track, because you're not going to be able to easily delegate tasks at the start, because you're going to be changing every single week. And that sort of keeps it really exciting, but it's important to sort of, keep a relaxed atmosphere within your group and build those strong connections early to make that easier further down the track. And everyone who's going to this subject, it's, it's selective entry. So everyone does kind of know what they're doing. So I think, give people a bit of time to sort of, speak up and get comfortable, and then you'll really benefit from that in the long run. Onto a couple sort of cultural differences. I think growing up in Melbourne, I've had a lot of exposure to, other cultures and stuff like that. And so working a team was of international, people from all across the world, was something that I wasn't, completely out of my depth with. But it was funny that when we went into the organization, that was sort of when we got the cultural shock. We dressed up, all nice to go into our meeting, and everyone was just in hoodies and t-shirts and stuff. So we were a bit taken aback. We were like, oh, I didn't know everyone was so laid back. And they just sort of said, yeah, you guys just, wear whatever you want. We don't mind. And, that was kind of interesting. But I think from a team perspective, with the cultural differences, I think it's really important to, give room for other people to speak up, because some people might be a bit more, you know, not as keen to sort of, you know, jump in and just say whatever they want as some others might be. So I think it's really important to, you know, give space for other people to speak and leave some silence even after someone's finished saying their piece, to let them sort of further share any more opinions. And reflecting on my experience, there are some things that I would have liked to have done differently. I think the opportunity to gain connections, like what Chris mentioned before, I think is something super important. I'm pretty happy with how I did it within my group, and you know, with our teachers and stuff. But I think try make an effort to go outside the group, your group, into the other people who are studying the subject, and really try to build connections across that, because, you know, especially, you know, studying online and things like that, I think to have an opportunity to be with 60 students over a whole semester, it's something that you're not really going to get again. And to all be interested in management consulting, for example, you might all be finishing up at the end of the third year. I think, you know, to be in a similar boat as people, I think it's really important to sort of build those connections with those people. And like they'll hopefully pay off in the future, but, you know, it's still nice now. We're still in contact with each other, and it's really good. And also with the client, I think that's really important as well. I think that's something that I would have liked to have done differently, was to sort of, you know, really hold on to them a little bit more. But I think after doing the presentation and then having exams, you kind of like, well, you know, a bit overwhelmed and relieved. But I think that's definitely something that, you know, everyone who does want to do this subject and gets to complete this subject should definitely try and make the most of. Onto sort of workload and how much we sort of put into each day on our project. It was crazy variable. Like the project, it's always changing. You come a week and you think you've answered all the questions that they had last week, and then they go, oh, not really, maybe like this. So that's something that you kind of have to get used to. But throughout the whole project, even though that wasn't the right track, you slowly refine and find the right path. So don't be scared by that. But, you know, and everyone's doing different subjects, so there'll be a lot of change. So you might have mid-semesters coming up. People had a mid-semester test during our meeting time with our client, and then they'd have to skip that. So it will always be changing, but you'll have those 2 hours on a Monday Arvo, and then a 4-hour meeting with your team throughout the week, and then just on top of that, add an hour here and there, every second day. And then as it gets sort of closer to crunch time, you might have to put in a little bit more time, but, you know, start as early as possible. If there is downtime between other work, even just do a little bit, a couple minutes, and thinking about it will also help you in the future. It's slowly ticking along in the background of your mind. So just try like intermittently work at things. And you might even just get the solution the last week. So that happens with a lot of people. Like, I didn't really know what our whole thing was about until like week 8 or 9, but, you know, it all worked out. And I think, it's a really exciting process to sort of go on. And I think it's a really motivating work, because the work matters. So I think it's a lot easier to put in a little bit more time than with your other subjects, because you also have to add value every single week when you meet your client. So you will be like pushed a little bit more, and I think that makes people work a lot more effectively than, you know, just sort of doing it, like procrastinating it until the last minute, because there is no last minute. And then I sort of go into some things that I'd like to have known that aren't in the handbook, really. I think that doesn't matter how many mistakes that you make along the way, they're all helping you. Every single one of the mistakes that you make along the way, it's sort of like what I was referencing before, you sort of get down the wrong path. But each time you're going down that wrong path, you're getting on closer to the right one. And I think that's, you know, something that you want to know before you sort of go in, because, you know, like, you will not really be sure of where you're heading until the end. So to know that making those mistakes along the way is actually helping you for that final product it's a lot easier. I guess it makes it more comfortable when you do get into the subject. Being prepared, like the first meeting, I think just put as much as you can onto the table. And then I think that'll set you up a lot for the future. Use as much industry software as possible throughout the course, because that's going to be so helpful in the future when you're working, because that's all you're going to be using. I don't think many places will be using Canva. You'll all be on like PowerPoint and stuff like that. So I think that's something that I would recommend doing. And also you'll get a crazy amount of support from like your mentor, Chris, your client, and the other people in your group, hopefully. It's really, really, really helpful. And I think some people might be daunted by the amount of work you have to do, but the amount of support that you get really, really makes it easier to complete the tasks that you face. And it's just a great experience. It's going to help you so much. Like as Chris was mentioning before, the experience that you get is really important for your future. Like at the end of our project, we presented to 60 high-ups from all Victorian government departments. And they were all listening to us and asking us questions, and we could answer them confidently because we had made all these little mistakes in the way. When they ask a question, we could say, yeah, we did that. And we could give them a confident answer. And that's sort of when you go, wow, we did so much interesting work, and these people are asking us questions and saying, oh, good job. So I think it's really, really rewarding once you get to the end. And I think that, whatever, daunting experiences you might have heard, that is a really good growing experience that I think that, you should take on. Yeah, that's it.
That was awesome, Hugh. Thank you very much. It was, I learned, I didn't realize you'd presented to so many folks for TCV, so that's quite impressive. Well done after the fact. There's a question there from Zane. Zane, did you mean that question for Hugh or more generally for me? So you said, how can we solve a strategy or internal management problem? How to, is that your question, Zane? You're wanting to know how do we do it, or could you give me a little more information?
Feel free to unmute yourself or turn on the video.
Yes, I have a little confusing about that. In the deck we have a good logic to present something to our clients. So as a student, how we can do that? Give a nature thinking, or nature have a logic thinking for the clients. I've confusing about that.
Do you mean how do you present it? Zane, do you mean how do you present it to the client, or do you mean how do you use it after the subject is done?
Because you can find a problem in the management or some things in the companies, so you should give some clients, you get some ways to do that. So how to something we know that some swords, something like this is mathematics, some things methods. How we can do that? Make it have the logic, have the natural thinking for our clients in this subject.
Okay, so my apologies. I'm not quite clear on the question, but I'll do my best to answer it. I think if I understand correctly, you're going to learn how to present that information. You're going to be taught how to do that. So you will come in and you won't know anything about the client. You won't know, highly unlikely, anything about the client. You won't know anything about the project. And the client will present you at the start with a brief around what they're aiming to have considered. And then you negotiate with the client to understand what is their pain point, what is the thing that they really need to have answered, what are they trying to learn more about. And then each week I teach techniques around how to think about the problem, how to break it down into pieces. You go back and you do that for your client with the material. You confirm with the client about what they think. Are they in agreement? Would they offer anything different? And so it's broken up into tasks along the way that ultimately result in building, like you said, they're building a storyline. So building an understanding of the client, the problem, the issue, collecting data and research and analyzing it, whatever their problem is, so that you can deliver solutions or a conclusion, recommendations to the client at the end. Does that answer, or am I off track?
Yes, I understand. Thanks.
Zane, did that lead to any follow-up questions for you? Is there anything else you want to ask?
No, thanks. I think I understand.
Okay, all right, great, all right. Anyone else have any other questions? Either any questions for Hugh about his experience? Yes, Kavi, you've got your hand raised.
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. It was very informative. I joined a bit late, so I have a question about entry to the program. Do we need to, do we have a case interview after the written application, or it's just based on the application that we selected?
Yeah, Kavi, that's a great question. And your timing couldn't be better, because I actually was going to cover that after Hugh was finished speaking. So the quick answer to your question is no, there's not a case study. Yes, there's an application and there may be an interview involved. But if you hold out for just a couple moments, I'll have a slide that'll lay it out, that'll explain it out with dates and information that'll make it even more clear than my oral explanation.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. I'm not just not sure if it's better to ask them now or hold on until the end.
No, sure, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, it's mainly about experience. So the first one is I've heard some stories about because people are assigned teams randomly by the coordinator. I've heard some stories about other people in their teams not pulling their weight and just making it more difficult for the people who are trying to do well. So I guess I just want to ask if that is true, and if it happens, how you could deal with it.
Yeah, that's a fair question. So look, it does happen, but it is more the exception than the rule. And that's my general feeling and experience over the past several years. Do I have a mechanism to deal with it? Absolutely. So it's kind of a combined effort. So one, I have to be made aware of it. So there is a responsibility on teams to be able to have that conversation with me or with the coach to say, we're having difficulty around distribution of work or people's contribution. And then I have several means, which I won't go into here, but I certainly have several ways that I can handle it, including there's not going to be a reassignment. So I do not ever reassign students from one team to another. That doesn't work that way. But there are other consequences or things that can be done around that particular group, workload, marks, and so forth that can assist. If the group can't come to a consensus on their own and can't work through it together, and individuals aren't fully contributing, then that's a conversation I have with those individuals. And I say that because it may be that the stories that you've heard or information that you've come across, I may not have been aware of it. It could have been my predecessor as well, but I may not have been made aware of it. So I encourage students the teams to try to work on it themselves and have that discussion, because it's an internal thing, but then also to make me aware of it as the subject coordinator and work with me, and I work with the teams.
I could say, I think motivation is really important too, keeping everyone in your team highly motivated. I remember our first 3 deliverables, we got the same mark every time. We felt like we were improving, and I think that was really a tipping point at the end where we could have sort of not put in as much time. And really started to bring down the workload and not try to strive as much as we could have. But I think, we all tried to work together and really discuss in detail what was going on and find out how people were feeling, and really try to address that kind of early, and then open up that discussion. And I think that's why it's also really important to start to not throw away delegations at the beginning, and really find out how everyone's feeling, and build that team bond quite early. I know it can't be easy. There's obviously going to be those sometimes But I think that's definitely like a mitigant that someone could do from like a student perspective.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Hugh. And the other thing I might mention as well is that I take those conversations. My perspective in this subject is that you're learning about management consulting and about the consulting process, but I'm really a big believer, as I pointed out, about the skills that you take away. And conflict that happens in the groups can mirror conflict that will happen when it's less safe to discuss, when it's out in the practical work world. So I've had students that I've had conversations with, we've negotiated and worked, and the feedback that I've received from the students is that the skill of being able to negotiate that and have those hard conversations was a development area for them that they took away as well. So while it can be a challenge, there's certainly some learnings to, and I sincerely mean this, there are certainly some learnings to be had around how to navigate that. So Andrew, I hope that answers your first question. And it sounded like you also had a second question.
Yeah, I think I have two other questions actually,
Sure.
unrelated to this, but thank you for your first answer. It's really helpful. But my other question is, I've heard that like the marks in this subject are generally like a bit lower than like you usually in like commerce subjects.
Okay.
So just wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, sure. Let me talk about that. So the first thing I'll say about marks is 75% of the mark is the same for the entire team, and 25% of the mark is up to your individual contribution through a reflective essay and the contribution that you make, right? So that it's not entirely 100% a team mark. To your point around marks being lower, I think historically they start lower, and that's because what we consider to be an H1 in this subject is what we consider to be professional level, something that a client would pay for and that a working consultant would deliver. I have seen final reports and have marked final reports that have earned over an H1 in the final report that have started in the very first assignment at a 5% assignment. So we do small tasks at the start to help build up your confidence and your understanding and your skill in delivering to a professional level. So the first assignment that you have is 5%. So if a student gets a 65 on that versus a 75, we're talking about a fraction of a point overall, but it's great learning. So I've seen marks that have been earned at the start, the first several assignments, like Hugh mentioned, that might be a 65 or a 70, because there's a learning curve there. And those same projects have been delivered at an H1 level for the final report worth 40%. So it's about it's not about coming in and expecting that because we've got students that come into this subject with a 90 average overall, and they can be quite surprised and challenged by what we're expecting in a professional capacity in this subject to be delivered. But it is absolutely possible to get there. And I say to all students, don't be put off. And Hugh, you might be able to speak to this as well. Don't be put off by a lower mark earned early on, because it is absolutely possible to make great strides. I've seen 25 point differences between the first assignment and the final report when students learn what it takes to deliver at the most professional level. And it's incredible. It's just, I'm so proud of the students for doing that. Hugh, do you have any thoughts on that, around that low mark to high mark, or anything about that?
Yeah, well, that's what we did. So like, it's sort of the same experience we had. And I remember like it was difficult at the start, but I think like, yeah, having all those 5% deliverables, and you really understand that, like that's just what it is like in the real world. Like that's just what's going to happen when you're going to be doing this. And I think to an even higher extent as well, like once you're out. So I think it's just a necessary skill for the future. And to get that skill early, you're going to be above the rest of the cohort. To have experienced that and to understand the client needs, because that's what you're going to be doing in the workplace. So I think that, yeah, you can like save it from getting, H3s at the beginning. like, because you have such a high weighting towards the end, and you have your peer review and your, your essay. So like, I think that's where I sort of saw our tipping point after those first three. And I think, really like having a keen eye for what things you can improve is something really important to take out of those first few deliverables, because that's when you're going to get the most feedback. Then at the end, it's going to be sort of little things that you keep adding up, and then you sort of, create this final product. But at the start, you have so much feedback to get through. And if you sort of just fix all them, then you will end up with like, a really strong final.
And students do end up with H1s in here and H2As and some H2Bs, but students, it's certainly possible to do well in this. So that's my response back to that. Thank you, Hugh. Andrew, did you have a third question?
Yeah, actually, my third question is pretty similar to what Tristan just put in the chat. It was about like the whole online delivery thing, because there's like multiple components. There's lectures, consultations, and like client visits. Are the client visits also online? Because I think I might have heard that this sem there was some client visits that were in person.
Yeah, so historically, so since COVID, since the subject is running during the last couple of years, it's been entirely online, right? And that's the nature of where the students are located, what the clients are looking for. We are still in the process of finalizing that for semester 2. It's not a simple process. There's several moving parts that help us make that decision. And partly one of the things will have to be around clients. So there's the lecture and the workshop. And Joko, I think correct me if I'm wrong, that's most likely going to be online.
Yep, that's going to be delivered remotely.
Yeah, so remotely. So the lectures will be remote. You have to be there live for those. And then, this semester they were running on Mondays. And then we had the 2-hour workshop with your team. So the lecture is all 60 students. Then you're in one of 3 coaches groups with your team of 5. And those run for 2 hours. This semester they ran on a Monday. Those are also online. The client visits, though, if you can imagine, it's really, that's the conversation we're still having, because some clients in the past couple of years, they no longer have an office. So the only option available might be online. Some clients might be in a physical location. We have to consider, there's a couple things to consider. So it's not as simple that we know for sure. But what I can say, and just confirm, as Joko's just confirmed, the lectures and the workshops with your teams will be online, but the 4-hour meeting during the week, look, I'd say most likely to be online, but I'll know a bit more about that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, thank you really much for answering all of my questions.
Absolutely, Andrew. I'm glad. Thank you. Because I think the questions you're asking, you brought up some really good points, and it's going to be informative for those listening either today or listening to the recording. So Andrew, if that's covered, I might just turn to the chat. Tristan, I think I've answered that question about the subject going online. I think the second part of your question, Tristan, around is it going to be the same in the future? I couldn't say. We're really sort of going on a semester to semester look at this point. I was a big fan of when it was run in person, but I see the advantages to it being run online. But I just don't have an answer for you of what it will look like in 2023. All right, so Nadia's asked, one of the requirements is the completion of OB. Would it be, yeah, so as long as you have completed OB, so you cannot be concurrently enrolled, you can't be taking OB in semester 2, so it can't be running concurrently. You have to have completed it, but whether you got a mark or you got a completion for non-credit, it doesn't concern us, just so long as it's completed.
All right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I think it's important to have OB in part because the skills and things that you learned around teamwork, team development, those things that you learned in OB, absolutely we use them in management consulting. It's a foundation for our teamwork, so it's important to have that background. So any other questions or before I jump back in and explain the timeline for applying? All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and share again. We're almost to the end here, I think. So as you saw, we just heard from Hugh. So let's talk about eligibility. So you have to have completed at least 150 points at the time of applying. So 150 points by the end of semester 1, I believe, Joko, is that correct? That would include semester 1?
So could you repeat the question?
So the 150 points that they have, because they have to apply by the 15th of May and semester 1 isn't complete, do the hours, the points that they're taking in semester 1, can those count towards the 150 points?
So it is at subject commencement. That means that by the time they have started semester 2.
Got it.
So that's how we take into account.
Great, excellent. Thanks, Joko. You would need to have a minimum WAM of 65. You've completed OB and you haven't taken the similar subject of GMC. Here's what we base it on. You need to meet the eligibility criteria, the minimum WAM of 65% and application questions. Now, it may be that an interview is required. Again, it's dependent on the semester and the needs, my needs in terms of deciding, making decisions. And so you will be advised if there is to be an interview, if I'm requesting one. Just keep in mind as well that when you make it through the selection process and receive an official offer, you have to send us an up-to-date CV. If you don't send an up-to-date CV, you can't participate. And the simple reason is we pass that along to the clients so they get to know who the team is that's going to be working. And so it's important that you have that up-to-date CV. We've never had somebody not submit it, have we?
No, so like it's a requirement for them to when they're accepting their offer.
Yeah, great. All right, so the applications are actually already open and they close Sunday, the 15th of May. So you want to complete the online application form. Then we do a round of shortlisting. And if an interview is requested, you'll receive a notice of that. We do a round 2 of shortlisting, and then successful students are sent an offer, which they need to accept by the specified date. So here are the applications have been open since the middle of April. They close on the 15th of May. And if an interview is going to be required, we will tell you. And then those interviews will be conducted on the 31st of May. So basically the week before. So the 24th of May is week 12. So in week 12 of this semester, we would say, yes, you need to do an interview and here's when it is, or no interview will be required. And you'll know that by week 12. Final outcomes will be emailed by the 7th of June. Now, if you need help with your CV when it comes time to, if you've been accepted and you need to do a CV, the Career Center offers support around putting a CV together. If you need some support around interview skills, if you're asked to participate in an interview and you'd like some help with that, well, the Career Center also provides interview skill support. So that's just something to let you know is available. All right, so I'll just pause there. We're at the end. Oh, there's our website. Let me click first. There's our website for more information and where the application, online application can be found. But any last questions for me? If you have questions that come up, you can send them here to fbe-capstone-studies@unimel.edu.au. And as I mentioned, Joko will be on the other side of that email and he will quickly and efficiently and very well answer your questions. Why may students be required to attend an interview? Good question, Alyssa. So at times we need additional information to be able to make the selection. And so we have that option available that an interview and then the responses to the interview questions would be incorporated into the application process. Any other questions, folks? Well, it just depends on the info. So there's an application that provides us with information around your WAM, your answers to particular questions, and we would look at the information on the application process. And sometimes we're able to make a determination. It depends on semester to semester. It depends on number of applicants. It depends on a couple different factors where we may not need the additional interview information. Sometimes we do. So that's really, I won't know whether I need to conduct interviews until the applications close and I look across the applicant pool. Absolutely, my pleasure, Alyssa. Folks, you've been fantastic. You've asked some great questions, which I think will be very useful to those having a listen. I want to say thanks to Hugh for your contribution and giving your student perspective. It's unique and something that only you can offer, Hugh, and I appreciate you coming along and doing that. And then Joko, I appreciate you setting up everything and making sure it runs so efficiently and is put together, and all the work you do after the fact. So thank you for that. And I think that's all I have. Joko, anything else?
Well, I'd just like to thank Chris and especially Hugh today for providing insight into management consulting and providing comprehensive answers to questions from the audience. And last but not least, thank you to the audience for attending the Q&A sessions. Just a quick reminder that applications for management consulting will close on the Sunday, the 15th of May. So good luck with your applications if you're applying, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.